Hi everyone, this is Christopher Aaron coming to you. It is Christmas Eve and we have a little break from our regular program. We'll have the charts coming up in just a couple minutes, but I wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas if you celebrate Christmas, a belated Happy Hanukkah if you celebrate Hanukkah, or if you don't celebrate any of those, a Happy Winter Solstice a couple days ago. We are going to go for a little walk and just talk about some related subjects. And I wanted to introduce you to my two best buddies here. This is Klaus, the German Shepherd puppy, and this is Schooner, the White Husky. And we're going to take you for a little walk, and then we'll get to the charts in just a minute. Everyone, again, we are taking our walk here. I don't know if you can see the dog in the background there, but the three of us are here. I'll see if I can keep us all in the shot, but it might be a little difficult. But I just wanted to create this video to give you a little perspective as to my background on this holiday and ask you as well for your perspective. I've had a lot of interesting conversations with some people on this channel, and I'm kind of interested as to how you all arrived at the point of investing in precious metals or even considering it. It's certainly not a mainstream thing even at this point. And just to give you a little background on myself, how did I arrive at this point? I spent the first part of my career working in the military intelligence world, and I deployed twice to Iraq and Afghanistan, spent a year overseas, and it was a very interesting time for me. Can you guess what my specialty was overseas? It was creating maps for the Department of Defense and some of the special operations that were happening there. And so I gained an appreciation for the study of maps as they relate to human nature. Humans moving through nature, basically. Another really important thing that happened to me when I was overseas is I saw with my own two eyes that what we were being told in the news was not what was happening in real life. I experienced the wars, and I really saw that as a sum, over the time that I was working in that field, we were making things worse overseas, and I began to really question our policy of these perpetual wars. So, you arrive at such a point like this where you begin to question and you begin to say, if what I'm being told in the news is not exactly what's happening in real life, what other things should I question? What other official policy decisions that we are being fed do I need to actually investigate for myself? And it was sometime in the mid-2000s that I began to sort of apply this perspective to the financial markets. Again, the markets being the sum of human nature, including all the people that are trading, including those that are trying to artificially manipulate markets or take advantage of other people. All those people, investors, stackers, all these groups of people comprise the sum of human nature related to a specific market. So that's what led me to this point, and I try to do my best to create maps that show what is actually happening in the markets as best as I see it, and to bring the clearest analysis that I can to you. I've just found that over the years there's too many people saying, oh, the price of gold is going to go back down to $200 an ounce, or silver is going to skyrocket in 2016, and I just say, well, what's the basis for that? And I just try to show the clearest basis that I can for my calls. So again, I'm just curious how you all arrived at this point. If you want to share, that's awesome. If not, hope you have a happy holiday, and I will see you in the next presentation that'll be coming up on a slightly different perspective of the gold and silver markets. Hi everyone, we are back from our walk, and we're going to get back into the regular analysis that we do. We're going to be looking at the most recent action in gold and silver. And also this week, I wanted to let you know, we're going to look at gold and silver in Canadian dollars as well. I've been looking, and there's a significant number of people who are tuning in from outside the United States. A lot of people from Canada, Great Britain, Australia, and a few other places. So I think what I'm going to do is for each of the next several presentations, bring gold and silver priced in one of these other currencies so that we can have a better perspective. This is something that I was mentioning on the walk. I like to look at markets in different ways. Sometimes I will flip the charts upside down and plot the inverse. I like to look at them in foreign currencies, obviously, different time frames. So we're going to start that this week, and this will be with the Canadian dollar coming up here shortly. First, let's look at, real quick, since the Fed rate hike a week and a half ago, let's update this chart. Looking at our 6 major world asset classes. And look at the outperformance still by silver, really starting to distance itself, at least over the last week and a half. Gold now coming in second. U.S. stocks have rebounded to third. U.S. bonds still holding up. Commodities coming back a little bit, still in the negative, as well as the U.S. dollar now in the negative. So we're just looking at this again. I'm going to be showing this chart probably at least once a week. I really want to track to see what's happening with the precious metals since this rate hike. I made the point before that precious metals tend to rise in a rising interest rate environment. So let's follow this over the weeks ahead and see if this continues to hold up like I have been expecting. Turning now to silver, first in US dollars like we usually do. So again here, closing higher. Now the reason I didn't post this video yesterday on Wednesday is because the markets close early on Christmas Eve, and they are closed tomorrow on Christmas Day. So I thought I would make this video on Thursday to cover us for the whole week. So we can see silver closing higher. It's been a low volume trading week. You can see that from the lack of volatility. It typically is in the last few days before a major holiday. So just getting back to the 6-month perspective here, we're seeing this move off the bottom. And so granted, silver was at a low, and so we're seeing that outperformance from the low. But it's still significant so far what we've seen, silver leading the way. Let's compare this to the action in silver Wheaton again. And we had mentioned this tentative break below that short-term trend line. Silver Wheaton has recovered. So that is nice to see. So we're still calling this a valid short-term trend line. Silver Wheaton still outperforming the price of silver that we saw from the last slide. So that's still a good signal showing us this bottom may be coming into play. Now, this is a good time to mention I've updated this color key. I want to point this out to everyone because I try to keep all these colors the same in every slide. So I've added this new color here, orange, out of necessity because I realized that I wanted to make this even more clear what I was talking about. So both red and orange are going to be attention call-out signals. So for example, we have, I'm pointing out here this 3-year pattern in silver that has been forming. And I wanted to make these red hits on the upper trend line and orange hits on the lower trend lines for this
embedded wedge pattern that we're looking at that I believe is going to show us the bottom unfolding. And I wanted to change this so that we are keeping green as a target. So I really want to highlight things when I show them in green. Red and orange, I'm keeping these colors so that you see them, but it doesn't distract you from looking at the primary pattern, which is this blue wedge pattern here. So we're seeing that bottom here in silver, and it looks like we're rounding out of this bottom, the short-term bottom, and that we should be approaching the upper end of this wedge again, which will be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th attempt. And look, this wedge is coming in even lower now, so if the next attempt occurs at some point in the next 4 to 6 weeks, it'll be around the $15 level. So, guys, we are not that far away from silver breaking out of this wedge pattern. Of course, it may not break at this next attempt. It might bounce up, fall back down, and then break out sometime in later spring. But it's getting closer. Every hit on this trend line here in the bottom that's holding, and this thing is winding up to move to the upside, is my prediction. Switching over to gold, we see that moderate strength in gold, but again, not nearly as much as silver over the last 7 days. We are looking at the 6-month time frame for gold as represented by the GLD fund, and we're seeing that new low. It's just grinding around in this low underneath the double black line that held prices up in July, and when it broke has been holding prices down. So all of the buyers who came in here that exited the market here have been selling every time this price of gold gets back to about 1075 or 104 on the GLD fund. They're equivalent as far as the ratio goes of the price action. Switching over to look at the gold miners, and we're seeing this most recent time still upholding an outperformance, so still above these lows for the gold mining complex. So still holding this good signal, this potential bottoming signal, still holding up here. And just another check on the 2-year time frame for gold. And we're seeing this grinding kind of low here that's been going on really since mid-November. And hitting again at the lower end of this blue trend line. So we're showing these lower hits in orange and the upper hits in red. I hope this makes sense to everyone. And so this is almost looking like a double bottom here coming in December for gold, at least as far as this lower trend line goes. So indicating that there's a significant chance of at least a modest rise here over the next 4 to 6 weeks. Of course, we will know that the final low is in, or have a very strong signal about that, when we see this break above this upper trend line, which is currently around 1230. Watching for that this year, coming up in 2016. So let's look at the Canadian dollar now, and the action in the gold and silver markets in the Canadian dollar. So first we're looking at just the Canadian dollar itself versus the US dollar, which is usually a benchmark. And we're looking at a 15-year chart of the value of the Canadian dollar. Going back to the late 90s, early 2000s, I remember when it was almost 2 for 1. We used to go up sometimes to Canada and, go out to dinner or go out to some places at night, and the exchange rate was close to 2 to 1. And then I remember throughout my college years and early professional years, when I would come back, we would see the value of the Canadian dollar rising and rising and rising until it hit 1 to 1 and actually went above 1 to 1 versus the US dollar in late 2007. And this then had a big crash in the crash of 2008 with everything else, including gold and silver, only to rebound back up again. But notice the Canadian dollar did not break above the high hit in 2007. What happened then is you had a long, broad topping pattern and a break. We show this here in turquoise, a break below this long-term uptrend line that extended all the way back from 2002. So shown right here in red for your attention, this line was broken, and basically the Canadian dollar has been very weak. So you can see the importance of these trend lines. This is why I pay so much attention to them, is because when these really long-term important trend lines break, you often have a really significant move. So look at this. When it broke this was just over a year ago, moving from 90 cents on the US dollar down to 72 cents today. So that's a really significant move for a currency market. Now, where do I think this Canadian dollar is going in the intermediate term? I don't think it's going to fall too much lower. So basically, based on the highs that we've had forming here in this low, if you're drawing a parallel trend line with the highs, we have a target here shown in green of maybe about 5 or 10% lower than where the Canadian dollar is right now. I would expect there to be a bounce there. So a bounce may last 3, 6, 12 months. And then from there, we'll have to reevaluate. How strong does that bounce look? Is there going to be some stability showing in the Canadian dollar or not? We'll have a much better idea when we see that. But to answer the question of the Canadian dollar, I don't think it's going to fall too much lower right now. If it were to break through this lower trend line, we have our last support line here, basically at these generational lows, approaching 50 cents, not quite that low, 60 cents. So I don't expect the Canadian dollar to fall too much lower. So let's look now at the Canadian dollar priced gold market. Very interesting to take a look at this here. We can see this long-term magenta trend line, this linear trend line here for gold, still holding up to today. And the price of gold in Canadian dollars is just shy of 1,500. So it's a lot higher in Canadian dollars than in US dollars. Of course, the inverse of that is how weak the Canadian dollar has been. So you've had more people in Canada accumulating gold, basically as a result of the weakening of their currency, which is driving up the exchange rate here for gold in Canadian dollars. Now, the downtrend line from 2011 was broken, which is a positive sign for gold in Canadian dollars. You can see that break right here. And subsequently, we have formed this uptrend in royal blue. So Canadian gold looks strong to me. Let's zoom in on this last 5 years here. And we're looking at that uptrend now. And you could just see the number of hits on this short term, well, let's call it this was a 5-year downtrend line that formed 2011 through early 2015, maybe 4 years. We had all these hits shown in red on this line before it broke here, thus necessitating a new trend that's formed that we're in now. Of course, this corresponding to that long-term trend that we showed in the last slide. And it's just really beautiful if you look at how the pattern works here when it finally breaks this trend line to the upside. Look at how many times it hit that trend line on the downside, shown in orange. But it never broke through that trend line again once it surged above it right here. So that puts us there for gold. Gold looks pretty strong, and I would say we're going to have to watch to see what happens at this 1575 to 1600 level. This may take another period of time to break through this level. It's acted as resistance here. You can see that. But once it does that, the Canadian dollar priced gold is going to have a re-challenge of the all-time highs around 1900. This could still be a few years off, but 1500 to 1900, not nearly as far away as, for example, US dollar gold is. So gold looking strong in Canadian dollars. Let's look at silver in Canadian dollars. Also looks similar to silver in US dollars. The major differences here being that the bottom shown right here, again corresponding with this long-term uptrend line, this bottom looks a little bit different than the US dollar silver bottom. So I want to zoom in. Again, let's zoom into the last 5 years. And you can see this series of broken downtrend lines, again shown in turquoise. And you can see almost this channel here that has formed since mid-2013. This low right here looks a lot like it could be a final low for silver. When silver breaks above this blue trend line here around 21 Canadian dollars, I'm going to make one of my rare calls that this was the final low for silver in Canadian dollars. So I'm not saying that yet, but this is getting very close to breaking through this downtrend line. From there, we'll have another resistance around 26, so it could back off there for a period of a number of months. But I'll tell you what, for people who are in Canada and who are accumulating silver, this is a nice looking chart. This is a nice looking chart from a bottom perspective. So again, I'm not saying the price is going to immediately skyrocket in the next year or two, but it looks very much like you are putting a long-term low. So this is probably a very good place to be accumulating silver if you're in Canada in this price zone. Of course, with a sufficient time horizon of at least 5 years. I think that's going to do it for this presentation, guys. We see silver leading all the asset classes over the last week and a half. These bottoms getting closer, absolutely. People getting worn out, probably except for everyone who's tuning into this channel. Most other people are getting worn out of the gold and silver markets. And again, these early indicators coming in from the mining signal, from the mining sector. So guys, even though metals prices are not higher yet, I know I have a lot to be thankful for. I'm sure you do too. Happy holidays from all of us here to all you there, and I will see you next week.